Welcome back to Everyday Tech Explained. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us out. And subscribe so you never miss a deep dive. Today, we're looking at something that could be a real game changer in the energy world. Portable hydrogen cartridges. You can almost think of them like oversized AA batteries. But instead of powering your TV remote, they could power your car, your house, maybe even your stove.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild concept. And the company behind it, Toyota, is really thinking big. We've got a couple articles here from TechWaiter that lay it all out, and it seems like they're going for a whole ecosystem built around these cartridges.
Okay, so Toyota's subsidiary Woven Planet has been working on these since 2022.
Yeah.
But what's got me interested is how they've changed. These new cartridges are lighter, smaller, more practical for everyday use. But how would you actually use them?
Picture this. You're driving your hydrogen fuel cell car and you're getting low on fuel. Instead of hanging out at a charging station, you just swap out an empty cartridge for a full one. Kind of like refilling a propane tank for your grill.
Hold on, back up a sec. For those of us who aren't totally up to speed, how do hydrogen fuel cells even work?
Oh, you're right. Let's break that down. Basically, a fuel cell combines hydrogen and oxygen to make electricity. And the only thing that comes out is water. It's a really clean process, especially if you make the hydrogen using renewable energy.
Cleaner than batteries. I thought
Yeah.
those were supposed to be the future.
Well, they both have their pluses and minuses. Batteries store energy, while fuel cells generate it. Batteries are great for shorter distances and quicker charging. But fuel cells can go farther and refuel faster, which is where these cartridges come in.
Okay, that makes sense. So back to this whole cartridge system. Toyota's talking about delivering them right to your door, along with your groceries. And then they'd pick up the used ones to refill them. It's like the milkman, but for clean energy.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. But of course, there are some logistical things to figure out. Like, think about all the infrastructure you'd need. Factories, distribution networks, safe ways to handle and store them. It's a complicated system. And it could be expensive, at least at first.
True. But if we look at other tech advancements, like solar panels, the price usually goes down as things get better and more people use them.
Yeah.
And like you said, if we can make hydrogen with renewable energy, it fits right in with trying to hit net zero emission targets.
Absolutely. The environmental benefits are huge. But these cartridges could be used for more than just vehicles. Toyota's also looking at using them to power homes and appliances, provide backup power during emergencies, even as fuel for cooking.
Now, that's what I call versatile. Okay, so we have the basic idea of how it works, but let's dig a little deeper into how it could be used at home. Imagine powering your whole house with these cartridges.
Right. Think about it. If you had a few of these at home, you could potentially rely less on the regular power grid. It could really change the game in terms of energy independence, especially in places that have a lot of power outages.
And with all the progress in hydrogen fuel cell tech, like making batteries that can hold more energy, the cartridges themselves could get even smaller and more efficient. By the way, what does energy dense even mean?
Basically, it means squeezing more power into a smaller space. So a more energy-dense battery can hold the same amount of juice as a bigger one, which is super important for making these cartridges practical.
So it sounds like we're talking about a future where you could have a bunch of these cartridges in your garage, ready to power your house, your car, maybe even your camping trip. The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, they really are. And it's important to remember this tech is still developing. The Tech Radar articles pointed out that big car companies like Hyundai, BMW, and even Honda are all looking into hydrogen fuel cells too, which means there's some real momentum building in this area.
It's exciting to think about how these cartridges could change the way we live and how we use energy. But like with any new technology, there are some valid concerns. For example, how safe are these things?
That's a big question. We know hydrogen can catch fire, so obviously safety is a top priority. Toyota's doing a ton of testing, and I'm sure other companies are too. It's important to approach this whole thing with a focus on responsible development.
That's a great point. Speaking of responsible development, what about the environmental impact of making these cartridges? We've talked about using renewable energy sources, but is that realistic on a large scale?
Yeah, that's a key question. The whole life cycle of these cartridges needs to be looked at carefully, from production to disposal, to make sure they really are a sustainable solution.
It seems like there's still a lot of questions, but the potential is definitely there. We'll get into some of those questions, like cost and practicality, in the next part of this deep dive.
Yeah, you're right. We need to think about more than just the excitement and really consider if we can actually make this work on a bigger scale.
So let's jump into some of those practicalities. One that comes to mind right away is cost. How would the price of these hydrogen cartridges compare to, I don't know, filling up your car with gas or charging an electric vehicle?
Yeah, that's the big question for a lot of people, I bet. Like any new tech hydrogen is still more expensive to make and get to people than using regular fossil fuels. But the article said that as we make more and the infrastructure gets better, the prices should go down. It's kind of like what we saw with solar panels. They used to be so pricey, but now they're getting more affordable.
I see what you mean. But building a whole new system for energy seems like a huge project. Would there even be enough space for all the places you'd need to make and distribute hydrogen safely?
It's definitely a big challenge, and we'd have to change how we think about making and using energy, but it's not like we haven't done something like this before. Remember building the interstate highway system? Or rolling out broadband internet? Those are massive projects, too. They needed tons of investment and a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not impossible, but it would take a serious commitment from governments and businesses.
Exactly. And speaking of businesses, the Tech Radar articles mention that Renault is actually putting hydrogen fuel cell tech into their new concept car, the Emblem. It's interesting that they're also focusing on smaller batteries that can hold more energy.
Oh, that's cool. I'm starting to see how hydrogen and batteries could work together, almost like a hybrid approach, to create a really solid energy solution.
Right. And that's why this whole area is so exciting. There's just so much innovation happening, and we're seeing all these different technologies coming together. That could lead to some incredible breakthroughs.
Okay, so we talked about cars and homes, but the outline also mentioned using these cartridges for cooking. How would that even work? Would we be switching cartridges on our stoves?
Well, it's not as crazy as it sounds. You can actually burn hydrogen directly, just like natural gas, for things like cooking and heating. Imagine a portable hydrogen stove for camping, or a hydrogen-powered oven. It could be another way we move towards a more sustainable energy system.
I can see how being able to use it for so many things would be a game changer, especially if we can get past those safety concerns.
Absolutely. Safety is the most important thing. And while hydrogen can be flammable, it's important to remember that any new technology comes with risks. Think about the early days of electricity, or even gasoline. People were worried. But those worries led to safety rules and regulations that we just take for granted now.
So you're saying we shouldn't be afraid to explore hydrogen, but we need to do it carefully and responsibly.
Exactly. And I think that leads us to another point from the articles, the ethical side of developing this technology.
All right, what kind of ethical issues could come up?
Well, for one, we have to make sure that making and distributing hydrogen doesn't hurt the environment. We also need to think about what happens to jobs as we move away from traditional energy sources. And of course, we need to make sure this technology helps everyone, not just a select few.
Those are all really important points. It seems like there's so much more to think about than just the technology itself. We need to consider the social and economic impacts too.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to have these discussions now. While the tech is still being developed, we need to hear different perspectives and make sure hydrogen is developed and used in a way that's responsible and ethical.
This has been a really insightful conversation. I'm starting to see how these little hydrogen cartridges could have a huge impact on the future of energy. But if they do become commonplace, how would our everyday lives actually change?
That's the big question, isn't it? Imagine a world where you can just swap out an empty cartridge for a full one to power your car, your appliances, maybe even your phone. It could be a truly decentralized energy system where people have more control over their own energy needs.
It's like a vision of energy independence,
Yeah,
where you're not tied to the power grid anymore.
exactly. And because hydrogen can be made from renewable sources, it could be a major step towards a more sustainable future.
We've covered a lot today, from the basics of how these cartridges work to the broader implications for our energy future. It's clear that there are both challenges and opportunities ahead.
Definitely. And in the last part of our deep dive, we'll wrap things up by looking at some of the big questions that are still out there and what it all means for you, the listener.
So we've talked about what these hydrogen cartridges could do, how they work, some of the good and bad. But in the end, what does it all mean for the average person?
That's the real question, right? It's easy to get caught up in these big ideas about the future, but how would this actually change our lives?
Exactly. Would we all be driving hydrogen fuel cell cars? Would our houses be full of cartridges, powering everything from our fridges to our laptops?
Well, it's tough to say for sure, but if this tech really takes off, I think we could see some pretty big changes in how we live and use energy.
Like what, for instance?
Well, imagine never having to wait at a gas station again, or trying to find a charging station for your EV. Just swap a cartridge, and you're back on the road in a few minutes.
That'd be awesome for road trips, no more range anxiety. But what about using them at home? You mentioned powering our houses with these things.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. If we could make and store enough hydrogen at home, maybe with solar panels on the roof and an electrolysis system, we could actually become energy independent.
Energy independence. That sounds almost too good to be true. Wouldn't it cost a fortune to get set up, though?
It probably would, but remember, we're talking long term here. The initial costs might be high, but as the tech gets better and we make more of them, the prices could come down a lot.
Kind of like what happened with solar panels. They were so expensive at first, but now they're more affordable than ever.
Right, and if governments give people incentives to use hydrogen, like they did with solar, it could speed things up even more.
So we're talking about a future where people have more control over their own energy,
Yeah.
less reliance on big power grids. That's a pretty powerful idea.
It is, and it fits with this trend we're seeing towards decentralization in all parts of our lives, from how we share information to our financial systems. Hydrogen could be the next step in that direction.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have to figure out some practical things, like safety concerns and how making hydrogen affects the environment.
Of course. Those are super important things we can't ignore, and that's where research and development come in. We have to make sure this technology is safe, good for the planet, and benefits everyone.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at portable hydrogen cartridges. It feels like we could be on the edge of a big change in energy, but only time will tell if this tech really delivers on its potential.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be watching this space. I can't wait to see what happens.
Me too. And for everyone listening, we want to hear what you think about all this. Would you be on board with a hydrogen-powered future? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the tech that's changing our world. Until next time.